Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre.
Yeah. Well, signing this declaration is updating and sharpening the focus of cooperation. Great privilege to welcome my friend and partner and colleague Keir Starmer from the UK, taking time out of a busy schedule to come and visit. And I believe what we have done today is actually exemplifying what is in this text. It is addressing security in this turbulent time in Europe with the war in Ukraine, with instability around us, but there is a very strong foundation of cooperation between our countries on security inside NATO, but also bilaterally across the North Sea. We will be moving on to Estonia this afternoon to meet with colleagues in the Netherlands countries in the GEF context, which is a cooperation on security between regional countries here in the north of Europe. The second dimension, taking boat from Håkonsvern out here to Øygarden, is to focus on something which a few years ago may have looked like science fiction. And that's why it's real, because it's happening. Carbon capture and storage has to be part of the solution to reach our climate ambitions, while dealing with industry, with development and securing jobs. So I'm very pleased to be able to show my friend what has happened here. And so moving ahead with CCS, and that Norwegian expertise and industrial skills are part of that endeavor. But on the bottom of all of this, we have also had time to address the Premier League and how things are unfolding in Norwegian-UK relations in that scene. And that's part of the broad, also cultural relationship between our two countries. So, Keir, welcome heartily to Norway.
Well, Jonas, my friend and colleague, it's very, very good to be here to sign this declaration today, which, as you say, symbolises, I think, the relationship between our two countries that's been forged in harsh circumstances, but the closeness of our relationship, the trust that we have between us is palpable in everything that we do together. So this now takes it on to the next chapter, whether that's in relation to defence, where we've worked together so very closely for so many years, training, I think, now together for over 50 years, and we'll be doing that again next year, working and thinking alike when it comes to defence challenges, of which there are very many at the moment, but also in the field of energy, where, again, we have worked for many decades together, first with oil and gas, and now as we go towards renewables, which is why it was very good to come out here and see for myself this plant here and carbon capture. And of course, we are doing similar work on the UK side. So really excellent to cement that relationship even further, to take it forward in an enhanced way to the next chapter. We discussed today our NATO commitments, and of course that's extremely important in relation to Norway, the eyes and ears in many respects for NATO, and a very important part of the world for global both those fronts, to be here, taking them forward with this declaration. We can continue our discussions about Martin Odegaard, which took quite a deal of last night, but again, the closest of our relationships, for me, one of the best Arsenal players we've ever had, so thank you very much for that, on top of the defence and the energy collaboration that we have. Thank you.
Great.
So now we will open up for questions, and the first questions go to the daily newspaper from Norway, VG.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for doing this. My question would be, on your way to the GEF meeting in Tallinn, there's been a discussion and leaders lately about the security assurances to Ukraine and what should possibly happen if there is a ceasefire or a future negotiated agreement. So I would like you to update us on that, and I would also like to ask both of you whether it's in your plans for your governments to participate in a possible future force to maintain stability in Ukraine. Thank you.
Well, I think we share the view that this war should end. It could end easily if Russia stops its aggression and pulls out of territories occupied. Our principal view is that there should be no negotiations without Ukraine, and Ukraine has to be there to define the circumstances for such negotiations. But it is a war with terrible human costs and destruction, which really should end as soon as possible. So we will support Ukraine on its way to deciding that moment, when that would be appropriate. We have signed previously initial security guarantees. It was done by the G7 countries and also the Nordic countries. And we have concluded agreements, bilateral agreements with Ukraine, which for Norway's case is running alongside the Nansen package and the Nansen support, military and civilian, to Ukraine. I would not anticipate what the substance may be of such security guarantees, were there to be negotiations on ceasefire or anything of that sort. And no decision has been made on the Norwegian side to commit Norwegian troops in that case.
Let me begin by agreeing with Jonas, particularly about the question of how this comes to an end. Russia could stop this today, because it's Russian aggression that is causing this conflict. So we need to remember that as we go forward. It is important, if there are to be negotiations, and we don't know for sure whether there will or there won't be, that Ukraine is put in the strongest possible position, and that's been the consistent position of both our countries and our allies for a long time now. And that's why this is the time to double down on our capabilities, double down on our financial commitments and the sanctions, of course, as well, and to make sure that the training we're doing, and we're both providing a lot of training here on a joint basis together, our two countries very, very strong in our joint support for Ukraine. But it's important that we put Ukraine in the strongest possible position if there are to be negotiations, and even if there aren't to be negotiations. Obviously, again, I don't know what the negotiations might lead to, if there are negotiations, or what security guarantees might have to be put in place. But they're clearly part and parcel of the discussions that are going on in relation to any possible negotiations. But it would be a big mistake, in my view, to take our eye off the ball and not ensure that Ukraine is in the strongest possible position, which is why we've been doubling down on this at many of the international meetings we've had with our allies to discuss this. And Jonas and I had the opportunity both last night and again this morning to discuss in confidence our joint approach in relation to this particular challenge.
So the next question goes to the Norwegian broadcaster TV2.
So this is for streamer. So this is a safety questions as well, but we all seen the news this weekend about Prince Andrew and his allegedly contact with the Chinese spy. Have you been in contact with Buckingham Palace and Prince Andrew about this matter, and are we in Europe too easy on Chinese espionage?
Well, in relation to any discussions with Buckingham Palace, there's a long-standing convention in the United Kingdom that's never spoken about. But of course, we are concerned about the challenge that China poses. Our approach, as you know, I had a meeting with the President just a few weeks ago now. Our approach is one of engagement, of cooperating where we need to cooperate, particularly, for example, on issues like climate change, to challenge where we must and where we should, particularly on issues like human rights, and to compete when it comes to trade. So that's the strategic approach that we've set out as a UK government. I'm not going to comment on Buckingham Palace or the royal side because, as I say, by convention, the government never does.
The next question goes to GB News from UK.
Catherine Forster for UK Broadcasters. You're talking about security. Carbon capture is controversial and expensive. How is what you're doing here today going to help people back home? And also, still on security, given these Chinese spy revelations, is seeking closer ties?
Let me address the first part of your question first. which is the huge benefit there is to the UK of our joint work. For many decades, we've worked together on oil and gas, which has provided us with energy for a very long time now. A transition to renewables is on its way. Carbon capture is part of that. And so, again, it's really important that we're here talking strategically in terms of material benefit, because every time I'm working internationally, I am focused on what the delivery is back at home. You will have seen that there was an investment of £4 billion announced last week in jobs across the country, Teesside in particular. So I'm really pleased to be able to continue that strategic work. I'm very pleased to be able to ensure that everybody heard that announcement of last week, £4 billion, which will be measurable in jobs back in the UK. Good, well-paid jobs for many years to come. Carbon capture has a potential for decades and decades of work, and we're probably two of the best placed countries in the world in relation to this cutting-edge technology, this approach. So this is very much important strategically, very much important internationally, but also of huge importance to very many people back at home who will be benefiting from those well-paid skilled jobs, which is consistent with my approach of saying we'll have clean power by 2030, we'll be a mission-led government, and we want to ensure that everybody in the UK feels better off and secure and safe in a way they haven't done for the last 14 years. In relation to China, our approach is the approach I've just set out, which is important. It's important to engage. Of course we have to challenge where we must, but it's better to engage to challenge than to stay aside, as it were. Important to cooperate where we can on issues like climate change, which need that cooperation. So I'm very pleased with the engagement and the progress that we've made. Thank you.
If I can just add, you know, our motivation is cutting emission, creating jobs. And this is really about that. And you will not find one scientist or political scientist addressing climate change and reaching our targets who can point to that without CCS. Because it can come from gas, which is making you know, a prolongation of gas as an energy source possible. That's important for jobs. But also the hard to abate industries like cement, for example. So if you're going to bring that down, this is the only way to do it. So this is a front runner. And what we are seeing now, if we can succeed in doing this, and you can succeed and we can succeed together, we may have turnkey concepts that can be applicable in a large context. And that's good for jobs, it's good for industry, and it's good for our kind of technological standing.
So the last questions today goes to PA.
Hi, Claudia Savage from PA. So in your discussions today about Ukraine, did you talk about the potentialities of a Trump presidency and what that will mean? The Kremlin welcomed today Trump's criticism of the use of US-backed weapons inside Russian territory. So if the US is to backtrack on that, will Storm Shadow missiles still be permitted for use by the UK? And just secondly, sorry, when will the powers from the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme come into effect? Has the delay on that enabled this Chinese spy situation? And given that it's not the first time a Chinese spy has been found to be quite high up in British life, is this a sign that the UK is the weakest link in the Five Eyes Alliance?
Well, in relation to the scheme, let me deal with that straight away, because we've been working on it from day one in government, and there will be an update coming shortly, so you'll have more information in relation to that. In relation to President-elect Trump, we have both spoken to President Trump. I had dinner with him in New York a few months ago for a couple of hours, where we discussed a number of things, including Ukraine. Jonas has spoken to him on the telephone, and yes, of course, we've discussed the strategic approach that we should take as allies. The allies have stood together behind Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. We continue to do so, but as you'd expect, we've been talking to all of our allies in relation to that, and there is this consensus that we must call it out for what it is, Russian aggression, and that we must put Ukraine in the strongest possible position. But yes, I think we both discussed this with President-elect Trump, as you would have expected.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think my perception was that the president was in a listening mode. He's been calling many colleagues in Europe, trying to find out, the thinking here, and appreciating that this is complex. I think that's the right point of departure. And our message is that, the sooner the Americans can define their strategy and their approach, the better, because that will bring some clarity to the approach on how this war can end.
On that note, we need to
Thank you
wrap
very
up this
much.
press
Thank you.
conference. Thank you.